Okay. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for everybody who took our first poll, trying to see where everybody is joining us from. And welcome. I'm so happy to welcome you here tonight to the virtual 2022 Maryland Environmental Summit. Right now, we would love for you to take a second poll to let us know which of this year's priorities you're most interested in learning about tonight. Maybe it's all of them. Maybe it'll be all of them after we're finished tonight, and then we'll have done our job well. So just take a moment to do that. And while you're taking the poll, let me introduce myself. My name is Ellie Cowan. I'm the Director of Government Relations at Preservation Maryland. And I also represent us as a member of the Citizens Campaign for the Environment, which is a coalition of nearly 50 organizations from across the state that work together to pass strong environmental legislation every year in Annapolis. But none of our work would be possible without you, our grassroots activists and partners, who raise your voices to demand that the General Assembly take action to protect our water, land, and our communities, to act on climate change and environmental justice so that all Marylanders can look forward to an environmentally sustainable future, and to push Maryland forward as a national environmental leader and model. We have over 700 people registered tonight, plus others who may be following along on Facebook, which is really just overwhelming and such a testament to the importance of these issues and how passionate you all are about getting to work. Tonight, you're going to hear from advocates and elected officials about Maryland's 2022 environmental priorities, which includes a look at the state budget and how to ensure in this year of surplus, it prioritizes the environment and environmental justice, the Environmental Human Rights Amendment, comprehensive climate legislation, and the George Walter Taylor Act that addresses PFAS contamination. Throughout the night, there will be more information about how to get involved in all of these issues in the chat function, so be sure to keep an eye out there. Before we kick this night off, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of the elected officials who have already joined us here tonight, and we'll be recognizing more as they come in throughout the evening. But those who've joined us already, we have Delegate Michelle Guyton. Welcome. Delegate Ben Brooks. Delegate Pam Queen. And Delegate Jen Terraza. All right. Thank you again for joining us. We're ready to go. So oh, there we are. Hi. There's always some kinks to work out at the beginning. So thank you for bearing with us. So to get us going this evening, we have Andrew Casserly, who is Senior Advisor to Governor Hogan, who is joining us. And thank you so much. And I will turn the mic, as it were, over to you, Mr. Casserly.
Thanks, Sally. Can you hear me? I think I'm live. Excellent. Hey, Ellie, thanks a lot. I appreciate the invitation to join you all this evening. Before I get started, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Kristen and Ellie and Danielle and all the good people over there at League of Conservation Voters. I do appreciate the opportunity to chat with you every year at this summit. It's far less stressful than when we're in the hallways or the committee rooms down in Annapolis, but I have to admit, I look forward to hopefully sometime this session, we're going to be right back in those committee rooms, and we'll be able to have face-to-face conversations. But I thought it would be appropriate, you know, as we enter into the final year of Governor Hogan's term, to kind of just do a quick little recap of where we've been over the past 7 years. Some of our highlights, you know, to the fact that we funded the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund to its fullest. We've also secured funding for program Open Space, led the fight to protect and restore federal funding for the Bay, committed historic funding to the tune of $1.5 billion towards a whole wide range of Bay initiatives. We've set a bold goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. The Maryland Commission on Climate Change has been doing a great job in their work identifying ways for Maryland to cut our carbon footprint. We've enacted the Clean Water Commerce Act, the Clean Cars Act, and several other bills to grow clean energy investment jobs. We've signed the Smart Power Agreement with Virginia and North Carolina to position Maryland as a regional leader in clean energy for the entire Atlantic coast. And we've passed important parts of our CARES legislation over the years. It's taken several, we've never passed it in its entirety, but we've passed several pieces, such as last year's REDS legislation, where we incentivize the use of brownfields. I'm proud to be part of Governor Hogan's team, and the fact that we can work in a bipartisan fashion to push forward much needed environmental legislation. And again, I'm really happy to join you all this evening, and I look forward to our discussion. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kristen Harbison. I'm the political director for the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. And before I introduce our next speaker, I wanted to shout out several other members who have joined us tonight. Delegate Al Carr, Delegate Mike Rogers, Delegate Julie Polakovich Carr, Delegate Brooke Learman, there you are, and Delegate Lily Chi. Thank you so much for joining us. And now it is I'm truly honored to introduce Chairman Maggie Mcintosh, although she certainly needs no introduction. Since taking office in 1992, Delegate Mcintosh has been the first woman in Maryland to serve as majority leader, the first woman to chair first the Environmental Matters Committee, and now the first woman to chair the House Appropriations Committee. Her awards and honors would take hours to list, but among them, include being named Legislator of the Year by both Maryland League of Conservation Voters, and then twice by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, as well as as an Admiral of the Chesapeake Bay by then Governor Martin O'Malley. I am truly honored to be able to introduce a woman who has defined the word champion, but it looks like she is not here yet. So stay tuned for that. And so, but now it is still my delight to introduce the next speaker, who is our keynote. Adam Ortiz is the new Region 3 administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but he is no stranger to the environmental community in Maryland. Adam has worked at every level of government, locally as mayor of Edmonston and Prince George's County, statewide, serving under the administration of Governor Martin O'Malley, and as chief of the environmental programs, first in Prince George's County and then Montgomery County. His work throughout his career included building energy efficiency, expanding recycling, confronting stormwater, expanding green infrastructure, especially for small and minority businesses. And that led him to receive the Kabler Award from Maryland League of Conservation Voters in 2015. And we are so honored to have him join us here tonight. Adam Ortiz, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kristen. It's always good to see you, and it's always great to be part of this event. It's not quite the same without the open bar and without people walking around serving you crab balls, but nonetheless, I'm glad that we still have a chance to connect, especially at this critical point in time. It's going to be it's a consequential legislative session in Maryland, as all of you know, and it's a consequential time in our country, no question about it. And I'm so honored to come from this community with all of you, taking on all the issues that we have, so many issues over, well, many years, but who's counting? And we've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot to show for it. And in this role as the Mid-Atlantic Regional Administrator, I have a different vantage point. I'm dealing with all sorts of issues, but all the lessons I've learned from Maryland are absolutely applicable. One, that things matter on the local level. If they don't make a difference for a small town or a small community or a marginalized or vulnerable group, then that issue is not working and it requires our attention. But I also, most importantly, learned is, we can get great things done. And as everybody knows, Maryland really leads the pack in the region and the country on so many different issues. And I see, my friends Brooke and Sarah and so many, incredible leaders, Paul and Kumar, tremendous folks who've stepped up and done great things and continue to do great things. And I reference that personally, but I also reference all those successes anecdotally, whether I'm in central Pennsylvania or West Virginia or Delaware. All the stuff that Maryland has done has been an example throughout the Mid-Atlantic region and throughout the country. Now, there's a lot of stuff happening in the federal level. You think Annapolis is hard, but Congress is pretty tough too. But President Biden and Vice President Harris are really clear that the environment is a top priority. And that is unusual for it to receive so much attention at the federal level. Climate change is front and center. Environmental justice is front and center. Environmental infrastructure, not just infrastructure, but environmental infrastructure is front and center. And also turning the corner on the Bay. And being in this role, and what I've said to our staff in Philadelphia, and it's a pretty big staff, it's 700 people, covering air, land, and water and everything in between, is that we have to make a difference. We have such a unique period in time where we're receiving so much support from the White House, but also so much support from the communities and the activists. And I see the chats going on, and I see Drew in the crowd and Alvia and so many great leaders. We've got to cover a lot of ground in this short period of time. And what I say to our staff is that we are EPA Region 3 is on the field and we are in the field. And I want to take a minute to explain what that means. We're on the field is that we are here to protect the environment. It is our job. It is the mission of this agency. And that is exactly what we are going to do every single day. We're going to take on the tough issues, and they're tough. They're tough everywhere. They're tough in Maryland and they're tough in West Virginia. But we have statutory authority to do stuff, and we will do it. We're not going to kick the can down the road. Secondly, we're in the field. We're not going to be a fortress up in some ivy tower in a federal agency. We are engaged. My first trip was actually to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to meet with farmers. And COVID has slowed down a bunch of other plans, but we are going to be talking to folks in impacted communities to make sure that our policies are working and that our engagement is working and that our grant programs are working and that we're listening and engaging. So we're on the field and we're in the field because, many of you have heard me say this all the time. Environment's a big deal. It's a big thing. It's everything, and the causes of all the stressors and that we have in the environment come from all sorts of sources. So there's not one government entity, there's not one prophet, there's not one legislator that could turn it all around. We're all in it together. We have to work together on every single level of all the resources and intellect and power and passion that we have to get things on the right track. And that is how I'm taking up this role with all of you. So I really do think that we have a once in a generation opportunity here. Millions of dollars on the table, big emergency crisis moment. But a lot of willingness to get it done. So stay tuned, lots to come. I'd be remiss, and I do wear my Maryland colors, but, Chesapeake Bay is front and center for me. As folks know, there's litigation against the EPA because the last administration did not quite do enough. So I want to be really clear. We are going to turn a corner on the Chesapeake Bay. We are going to fulfill our role here at EPA, holding states accountable. And as some folks know, maybe everybody knows, before at the end of the new year, I sent a tough letter to Pennsylvania saying that they have to fully fund and commit to their watershed implementation plan. We have got to get it done. And if they don't, we will take action. The last administration said that the 2025 Bay goals were aspirational. That is not the position of myself. That is not the position of the Biden-Harris administration. Those goals are a commitment. They are an agreement. And as my friend Jocelyn Pena-Melnick says, your word is your bond, and it is our bond, and we're committed to get there. I also want to reality check, we're behind. we made tremendous progress, and Maryland has led the way in so many ways, from cover crops to green infrastructure to stormwater funding. We all know that stuff. But there's areas we can improve here in Maryland, and other states have made strides in some areas and are falling behind in others. But we may not get quite to our goals in 2025, but we will accelerate. And I will use every power that I have in this role to make sure that all the states and municipalities are doing what we need to do, what we've committed to do, because our word is our bond to the Chesapeake Bay. Environmental justice is a huge focus. And as many of you know, I served 3 terms as the mayor of Edmonston, working class community. And, we were able to restore the environment there in a place where, people are scratching it out in a marginalized community, historically segregated community. And we're able to work with our federal and state partners to turn it around. Right now, our team in EPA Region 3 is doing an in-depth analysis using EJ Screen. Some of you are familiar with that, but basically it's a mapping tool that utilizes all sorts of data layers to figure out which communities are in the most distress, air, water, human health, and which ones are working class communities where people may not have the means to get to the doctor all the time, may not have the means to mitigate the health challenges that they have. May not have the means to get up and move someplace else. So we're doing that data-driven analysis and coming up with a list of our priority communities for environmental justice. We'll be working closely with our state partners and folks like you in communities throughout the region to make sure that we're bringing all of our resources to bear to make sure that everybody gets the high quality of life and the health that they deserve. So stay tuned. There's a lot of exciting things happening, but as we restore our environment, we also have to heal the social divisions that we've all inherited from our country's and Maryland's history and our regional history. So I can go on and on and on, and I'm sure I've already overstayed my welcome here as your keynote. 5-minute keynote, did my best to cram as much in as possible, but EPA Region 3 is on the field, and we are in the field. And we look to Maryland to continue your leadership role. In my letter to Pennsylvania, I made it very clear that downstream states are doing tough stuff, and Pennsylvania needs to do it as well. So the region is looking to you, Maryland, and I look forward to stepping up with you and turning the corner on the Chesapeake Bay and all the other environmental challenges we have. Thanks so much, Kristen.
You can never overstay your welcome for us, Adam. Thank you so much for being here. And now it is my great honor and privilege to introduce Maggie Mcintosh, who needs no introduction. I was so excited to introduce her. I started to try to introduce her earlier. She has been a groundbreaker in so many ways. As the first woman to serve as majority leader, the first woman to chair Environmental Matters Committee, the House Appropriations Committee. She was the Maryland League of Conservation Voters Legislator of the Year, as well as twice by the Legislator of the Year by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, as an admiral of the Chesapeake Bay, named by then Governor Martin O'Malley. I am beyond honored to introduce a woman who has defined the word champion, and is a hero and mentor and friend to so many of us, including me. So thank you so much for being here, Maggie.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm not on mute, in other words. I want to thank everybody for inviting me and letting me take a couple moments to share this evening with you. As you know, at the end of this year, I am not going to be running for re-election. And when I look back on the 30 years I've had in the legislature, I mean, first of all, that's stunning. Secondly, when I think about the moments that have made me like almost gasp for air, I think about the time that this brand new guy, who just took over as speaker, Mike Bush, came up to Baltimore, asked me out to a football game of all things, and he leaned over at halftime and said, I know you want to be the majority leader again. You did a great job as majority leader, but I need somebody who'll look after the Chesapeake Bay, and I want you to do that. And so he asked me to chair the Environmental Matters Committee at the time, and I had 12 straight years there with a great vice chair, Jimmy Malone, and many, many great members, including several that continue to be on the Environment and Transportation Committee, who, you know, really served as tremendous champions for the environment. I got a little memo from staff today, and it told me all of the great things in the budget for the environment. And one of them is the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust. That bill passed when we were, and when I was chair of the committee. We did so much in open space, and open space is going to be fully funded this year in the Bay. We did so much with the critical areas and making sure that we amended the critical areas so that the buffers around our waterways were protected, and local parks and playgrounds. Maryland Municipal League came in and really convinced our committee about how important this is. I could go on, including talking about what's in the budget for the Conowingo Dam Watershed Implementation Plan, which is very important in the dredging of that dam, which Adam just referred to. I mean, we do so much downstream, but if upstream doesn't join us, we are in trouble. I think that, you know, during the tenure that I had in the Environmental Matters Committee, we focused, like laser focused, on farming, cover crops, nitrogen removal, cleaning the bay, wastewater treatment, you know, all of that, getting our wastewater treatment plants a funding source so they could really upgrade and be a partner in the cleaning of our water and our waterways in the bay. Now we are moving into a new era, and have been for some time, where we want to focus on the climate. So I will say to you this evening that as I leave the legislature, I couldn't be more happy to have Chairman Kumar Farvay, who followed in my footsteps in that committee and expanded the portfolio of that committee, leading the way on climate change. This is a really important year for those of us who care about the environment. So, you know, there are a lot of very talented people who are working to make sure that our environment is clean and that Maryland leads the way. And I will say this, I have told several groups today that, you know, look, I view myself the last 4 to 6 years, or maybe even 8 years. I thought to myself, what do I want to accomplish this year? And I thought, I want to accomplish being a mentor to young people coming into the legislature, helping people move forward in the legislature, do their best job, you know. But if you are truly a mentor, you have to move out of their way. And that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I want to move out of their way, and I want to move on with my life. And I want to make sure that the people who are coming behind me, who are very talented and very good, have a clear sense of purpose. And as a matter of fact, a sense of purpose that possibly I never had. So I want to say thank you. And Kristen, it's such a pleasure to have you do the introduction of me. Of course, Kristen was on my staff in the Environmental Matters Committee, and we are great friends and will always remain great friends. And so to all of you tonight, let me just say, the budget's good. Any complaints, come see me. I love you all, and keep up your good work. Support Kumar and the committee, because he's got on this committee my soulmate, my running mate, Regina Boyce, who I love so much. Delegate Boyce is a star. Let's keep it going forward. Thank you.
And thank you, Maggie. I just have to say on behalf of all of us, for your insight tonight and for all that you have done on behalf of the environment and the environmental community throughout your years. We owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. We couldn't have had a better partner in this work. And I send the love of Kim Coble, who was sorry that she couldn't be here tonight. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Ellie, and thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. My name is Ellie Bassett. I'm your Miles Wide Riverkeeper with Shore Rivers, a nonprofit located on the Eastern Shore dedicated to protecting and restoring our waterways here on the shore. That was queued up nicely because I have the pleasure of introducing some leaders in our environmental legislature. But before I introduce Chairman Farvay, I do want to give a shout out to all the legislators who have joined us, and a quick update for everyone. We currently have 519 people on the line, which is really impressive and incredible. Doesn't even cover the live streaming that we're doing on Facebook right now. So thank you to everyone who's joining. So this is not all of our delegates and senators who are on, but just want to give a quick shout out, and I invite you to turn your camera on and wave. Delegate John Carden, Delegate Shanika Henson, Delegate Jared Solomon, Delegate and Vice Chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee, Dana Stein, Delegate Faye Martin Howell, Delegate Nicole Williams, Delegate Linda Foley, Delegate Heather Bagnall, Delegate Regina Boyce, and Delegate Nicole Williams. So again, there's more on, don't worry, we'll have more coming all evening. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'd like to welcome Chairman Farvay.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank everybody for attending. This is going to be an exciting year. I have to say that it's been a pleasure to work with my colleagues in the Senate this year. It's great that we could actually meet in person, and it's amazing how much easier legislation is when you do that. Working very closely with Paul Pinsky, who you're going to hear from soon. I know we're going to have groundbreaking, bold legislation on climate change. There are a lot of details, and Dana Stein, my vice chair, has really been indefatigable in putting together so much of the proposals that are specifically going in. But let's just talk about top numbers. Reducing by 60% the greenhouse gas emissions from our state, electrifying state vehicles, encouraging green procurement, especially green cement, which is an important new substance that we're going to have to transition to. Really getting serious about energy efficiency in commercial buildings and in buildings in the state of Maryland, and also leading the way to electrifying the Maryland economy. And what I mean by that is really transitioning away from fossil fuels and toward electricity, especially renewable and carbon-free electricity. You know, the only safe place to put a fossil fuel is in the ground. The longer and the more that we can keep in the ground, the better it is for absolutely everybody. And the fact of the matter is, we recognize that when it comes to environmental justice, there's nothing better than stopping the pollution of the air, especially in urban and suburban jurisdictions where it's especially pernicious. And here's a little factoid. If you ever run into somebody who doubts the importance of reducing air pollution in the city of Atlanta during the Summer Olympics in 1996, they banned the center city for car traffic, and emergency room visits for asthma crashed by 40%. There is a direct linkage between a clean environment and a healthy populace. And working with Paul Pinsky, working with Delegate Dana Stein, working with Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, who's going to be the sponsor of all the vehicle electrification efforts that we're going to make, we're going to have major victories. And I want to leave you with just one final thought, and this is a little kind of in the realm of the tactical details that we have to deal with, but it's important for you all to know this. This is the fourth year in a four-year term We have to get this bill on the governor's desk with time to spare, because if he decides to veto it, we have to have the opportunity to override that veto. So we cannot wait until the last minute. We are committed, and by we, I mean the House of Delegates, the Speaker of the House, and I know you're going to hear from Chairman Senator Pinsky the same thing, the Senate and the Senate President. We are all committed to getting this done and getting it done as soon as possible. I expect to drop my bills into the hopper in the next week, and we really look forward to having this gigantic victory for the people of Maryland and for the climate. Thanks so much for being here, and I look forward to working with all of you, and I'm so happy you're going to be helping us get this victory done.
Thank you, Chairman Farvay. That was a good inspirational way to leave us. I appreciate your leadership and your willingness to support on these, work these important issues. So with that, I'd like to, and I want to apologize if we announced you as a legislator joining us and you weren't able to turn your video on or off, so sorry about that, but thank you all for joining us. I do want to announce a few more before we move on to Chairman Pinsky. I'd like to get a shout out to Delegate David Moon. Thank you for joining us, Delegate Moon. Okay, and I know there's a few more, and I'll invite them to panelists so they can share their video. So we will now move on to the chair of the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. Thank you for joining us, Chairman Pinsky.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. 9 or 10 years ago, Maryland was in the forefront nationally on climate change and fighting it and on the environment. Unfortunately, over the last 7 years, we've fallen behind. We're no longer a leader. And that's why the watchwords going forward have to be boldness and urgency. We have to propel Maryland for many reasons. One, to protect our state, protect the planet, to move in the forefront of this country. And we can do that. And we have an opportunity with the Climate Solutions Now bill to put ourselves in the top 2 or 4 or 5 states in the country so other states can look to us. So we can be a leader and influence other states. But again, it means boldness, and it means we have to get across that we all have to understand the urgency. We ran into some challenges last year, but that's behind us. We're on the same page this year, and I am optimistic we're going to pass one of the strongest comprehensive bills in the nation. Chairman Farvay mentioned some of those, the reductions of 60%, eventually net neutrality by 2045, having not only our state cars, but hopefully with the federal money, electrifying all school vehicles. Too much emissions, too much asthma in our poor communities. We can address that. We can move towards electrifying our buildings. Actually, if we move towards electric, we can reduce the cost of construction. We can have all the power come through wires and not have to put piping in. This makes total sense, and we have a paradigm shift, and it's time to move on it. We can't do the same old, same old. We want to have a green bank. We can leverage much more money to invest in clean energy if we had a green bank. We need an energy hub, a clearinghouse. We need to have an urban conservation corps so we can put young people to work on sustainability, on environmental justice across the state, from Baltimore City to Prince George's to Dorchester County, to have them work similar to the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. We can do creative things in the state, and that's what we're trying to do with this legislation. But a few enlightened legislators are not enough to get this passed. We need thousands of people on the ground in community groups, civic association, churches, and synagogues, writing letters when things are healthier, knocking on doors, organizing, making phone calls. There are 516 of you on this call. If you each contact 10 people, that's over 5,000 people. And if all the 188 legislators get 20, 50, 100 emails, phone calls, we have to get across a message. There's no other choice but to support the Climate Solutions Now Act. We have to be there at every turn when we come in person back in the legislature, in our communities. People still go to the supermarkets to shop. We have to let our elected leaders, our colleagues, there's no other choice. The planet and our state deserve no less. The flooding, the severe storms, is not going to reduce over time. It's going to get worse. It's going to make it difficult to open up stores in Annapolis and on the Inner Harbor. And it's affecting our commerce. It's affecting our farmers. We're losing fields to saltwater intrusion. Some people in the rural areas have been a little slower in coming to join the fight for against climate change. It's affecting all of us, and we have to bring everyone into the loop. So we're excited and we're optimistic. We're in conversation with the House. If there are changes and differences, we will work them out. But we in the Senate are committed, and I'm sure the House members feel the same. But we can't be complacent. We cannot be complacent. We got to push. We got to push. We got to demand. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. And we have to take that to heart in everything we do. So climate change is forefront in the legislature, but there are other issues as well. You've heard about the things called zombie permits. You have companies that are discharging things into our waterways. They haven't been inspected in 10 years, 15 years. That's got to stop. There's been a conscious attempt by the Hogan administration to tell the agencies, don't worry about inspections, don't worry about enforcement. If you lose 10 inspectors or 20 inspectors or 50 inspectors, don't worry. Unfortunately, it creates the Wild West out there, and people think they can do whatever they want to do. You've read about Valley Protein, the discharge into the waterways. And Valley Protein was a company the state wanted to give $13 million of taxpayer money to help them out when they've been breaking the law for years. So we're going to have a bill dealing with zombie permits, so they can't get away with not inspecting and doing enforcement across the state. MDE has to be more responsible. The Hogan administration has to be more responsible. So we have many challenges ahead of us, many challenges. And I've spoken to my colleagues in the legislature. They want a strong bill, not only because we have to fight climate change and improve the environment, but they want to run for office on an issue, on a policy, so they can go to the people and say, look, judge me. And if the people say, what should we judge you on? Well, some of those issues, among those issues, one is climate. And when we have an omnibus climate change bill, I hate to say it's the old adage of which side are you on, but we're going to have to ask that question of the public and the legislators of which side are you on? You're either on the side of the environment and on social justice and environmental justice, which unfortunately has been ignored for far too long, or you're not. We have to make the appropriate investments. We got to ensure that the people who've been abused and underrepresented and receiving more emissions than many other people, that's corrected, that we don't live like it's been. We have to make those changes. We have to demand them. So look, I'm pleased that you're here, that when I look around and I speak to my committee or to other groups, I can look around and see there are people behind me. The one thing a leader doesn't, or someone who is in a leadership position doesn't want to be in, is to look around and see there's nobody behind them. And it's going to take the grassroots to mobilize thousands of people to tell our colleagues who are on the fence, who aren't convinced, that they have no other choice but to vote with the public, serving the people, working with people from Garrett County to West Baltimore to Dorchester, to Prince George's, to Southern Maryland, that we're going to move forward. We're going to be a beacon in this nation. And hopefully in the next 4 to 6 or 8 weeks, we're going to have a bill that we're going to be very proud of and we're going to be able to celebrate. So thank you very much. You got to keep up the fight. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Chairman Pinsky. Again, I'm here personally to protect waterways of the Eastern Shore, Valley Proteins. Thank you for bringing it up, for talking about it, and reading the chat right now. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's inspiring. I'm seeing people saying, we are here. We are ready to support this. We are ready to do a call of action. So thank you for your leadership. Before we move on and shift gears to our priorities, I'm going to give a few more shout outs. And again, I invite you to turn on your camera and give a wave. Delegate Lorig Charkoudian is with us. Delegate Boyce, Regina Boyce, thank you for joining us. Delegate Jim Gilchrist, who may not have video, but I see is on. And then two who had to hop off, but I want to acknowledge that they joined us, Senator Jeff Waldstreicher and Delegate Jessica Feldman. Thank you all for joining us again. I hope to see more join us and share that video. And with that, we are now going to shift to our priorities, and I'm going to welcome Nina Beth Carden.
Thank you, Ellie. It's wonderful and inspiring to be here this evening with everyone. I am Nina Beth Carden, the director of the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights, and I have the distinct honor of introducing the wonderful Stacey Hartwell, who will talk about the first priority bill to be presented this evening, that is the Environmental Human Rights Amendment. Stacey is a seasoned renewable energy consultant, having honed her expertise while working for the energy giant Tesla. She's a devoted community advocate, serving as the co-chair of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the NAACP Maryland State Conference and a board member of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Stacey is the kind of champion we all want on our side. We talked about champions before. Maggie Mcintosh is certainly one of our great champions. Well, Stacey is a champion as well, and we are delighted that she is on our side, the side of all of us. Stacey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Carden. Good evening. I'd like to begin with some important statistics from a recent poll conducted on the Maryland Environmental Human Rights Amendment. These independent professional poll results are based on feedback from a representative sample of Maryland voters. The poll yielded the following. Erin, will you bring up the slide, please? Thank you. As you can see, more than 75% of Maryland voters support this amendment. In full disclosure, 10% oppose it and 15% weren't sure. If the election were held today, the majority of Maryland voters would vote for protecting this right in the state constitution. Maryland's went on to share that if this issue were on the ballot, more than half, approximately 52% of our voters said it would make them more likely to come out and vote. This amendment is a unifier. It speaks to the majority of our voters. The clear takeaway here is the amendment is not red, it is not blue, it is clearly purple. As a footnote, I'd like to highlight the margin of sampling error on this poll is not greater than plus or minus 3%, and that puts it at 95% confidence level. In other words, these results are credible. You know, the amendment formally recognizes environmental rights as civil rights with defined protections, which enables communities impacted by environmental justice to seek support and intervention. If ever there was a cry for environmental support from our constituents, it would be for this amendment, as it aligns and it dovetails with the mission of the climate and environmental movement and the best interests of our residents. You know, unfortunately, race is still the #1 indicator of where toxic and polluting facilities are located. This is not an alternate fact. Pollution and other environmental hazards are concentrated in BIPOC communities of color, regardless of economic status. Maryland, unfortunately, as you've heard, is no exception. The state is supposed to protect, preserve, and enhance our natural resources, and therefore they are to be held responsible to ensure our well-being as stewards of these natural resources, not for the interest of corporations, shareholders, but to us, we the people. Over 100 constitutions around the globe have adopted a human right to a healthy environment. Several states in the US have adopted this as a human right. It's time, as you've heard earlier, it's time Maryland takes a lead on this amendment. It's time we step up, be accountable, and assume a leadership position once again. I'm not speaking to you in a vacuum. I'm a native Washingtonian. I went to 5th through 12th grades in Prince George's County. I now, as of 2018, live and work here in the county once again. While at Tesla, I had the privilege of speaking with countless Maryland homeowners, small businesses, community and church organizations on their views on renewable energy and state and local government approaches to considering their best interests in environmental decisions. It was through my outreach with Tesla that I was able to understand the full scope of environmental issues confronting communities of color, linguistically isolated communities, and low and moderate income communities, and the lack of power pun intended, these communities felt they had around their ability to navigate being able to address large-scale, compounded environmental impacts. And the overwhelming response has been they feel lost, under, and misrepresented on the environment. We're not only talking about protecting the environment, but we are also talking about the impacts on other tangential consequences of a contaminated environment, for example, property values. As we all know, amongst the most valuable assets a family has is their home. The value of homes impacts legacy wealth, how a family builds wealth and how they can leverage that wealth as the foundation for long-term financial well-being and a healthy financial legacy for generations to follow. I don't know if many of you have been following or heard of the recent Channel 9 expose on communities in Brandywine, asking why their real estate values for their property is less than that of similar communities in Montgomery, Howard, and other predominantly white communities. You can Google it. But, ask yourself, could one of the contributing factors be because Brandywine, Prince George's County, along with Baltimore City, Curtis Bay, Lothian and Anne Arundel County, Hebron and Wicomico County, and the like, bear the brunt of the polluting services that make this state function? The state, as many other states have, they've used predominantly BIPOC communities as dumping grounds for all the polluting services needed to help run this state, and have given them absolutely no consideration for their sacrifices, for the sacrifices they've made to keep this state functioning. And to add insult to injury, they continue to pile on more devastating infrastructure in these overburdened communities. Brandywine has more fossil fuel capacity than 99.9% of the country, and it is 67% Black. And as if having the state's only sewage sludge incinerator, multiple landfills, sitting at the convergence of 3 major trucking routes, 2 of which have been dubbed diesel death zones, as well as not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 coal gas power plants within a 13-mile radius, wastewater dumping into the waterways, and sunny day flooding. As if all this isn't enough, they are now supporting maglev, the gas pipeline on the Eastern Shore, the National Harbor Livingston Road battery energy storage station. Are they really going to allow permitting for this to be constructed in communities where people live? Those battery facilities are notoriously unstable. Those people are being treated over at Rosecroft are being treated like, guinea pigs, lab rats. And all of this to save 2 cents on their monthly electric bill, really? These communities have the highest rates of deaths related to air quality in the country, the highest levels of ozone in the state, second in the nation. And yet these agencies persist in their devastation of these communities. How much is enough? We cannot continue to undermine these communities and still expect them to thrive. This legislation serves as an equalizer. It empowers organizations with the leverage they need to help make fair and equitable decisions concerning the environment. It is the tide that lifts all ships. Vice President Kamala Harris said we cannot achieve health justice, economic justice, racial justice, or educational justice without environmental justice. This amendment is the common thread that uplifts and helps remedy other civil rights issues. These issues are inexorably linked, and it's time we acknowledge and act upon them. Before I close out here, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors of this amendment, those visionaries working so hard to give us the tools we need to protect ourselves and the environment. Amendment sponsors, Delegate Juanica Fisher and Senator Will Smith. Earlier advocates for this, Eric Barron and Obie Patterson, and then Delegate Vaughn Stewart. Saying their names out loud is important. They are stellar examples of responsible leadership. They see the big picture and understand the foundation to the remedy to our environmental ills. They understand accountability as a tool of a civilized society. Quite frankly, we would like to think of all of our elected leaders as being catalysts to fostering a dignified human existence for Marylanders. In closing, please lend not only your vote to this important amendment, but also your voice. Our legislators won't be concerned about any issue unless the people who elect them speak up. Please let them know how you feel about this fundamental, essential amendment. We hope we can count on you for this amendment. And we have the voters who support this amendment. We have the environmental justice community unanimously supporting this amendment. We need our legislators to stand behind and support this amendment too. The time for the Environmental Human Rights Amendment is now. Thank you ever so much. And now I'd like to popcorn over to my learned colleague, a stalwart environmental advocate, and my friend, Laurie McGilvray. Laurie?
Thank you so much, Stacy. Wow. I'm not sure I want to follow you, but here we go. Anyway, so good evening, everyone. My name is Laurie McGilvray, and I'm co-chair of the Climate Justice Wing of the Maryland Legislative Coalition. We're a group of 50 grassroots and professional organizations across the states. And I'm really thrilled with the turnout tonight. It's so inspiring, and I'm excited to talk about our hopes for bold, comprehensive climate legislation that's supported by our group, other partner organizations, and hopefully all of you that are listening tonight. As we heard from Chairman Pinsky and Chair Farvay, there will be comprehensive bills in a comprehensive bill in the Senate and several bills in the House. But rather than focus on specific bills, we want to talk about the major elements we want to see in legislation. So I'm going to go through several topics quickly and then pass the baton to two experts to talk in more depth about buildings, because building solutions are complicated and there'll be probably lots of questions about what's possible. So to start, we want emission reductions. We want to see greenhouse gas emission reduction goals go from 40% to 60% by 2030 and net zero by 2045. We want to calculate methane emissions over a 20-year time frame, not a longer one, and set standards for landfill emissions. In the realm of environmental justice, this needs to be central to any bill that we're supporting. And particularly, it needs to focus on overburdened communities that Stacy characterized so powerfully, and specifically require the development of strategies to address their particular needs and to provide targeted investment for solutions, including increased private investment. So for things like energy efficiency retrofits for low-income housing. In the area of transportation, we want to transition to zero-emission school buses across the state, transition the state fleet of passenger cars and light-duty vehicles to zero emissions, and be more like California with an advanced clean truck rule to require manufacturers to produce and sell zero-emission trucks. In renewable energy, we'd love to see provisions that promote more renewable energy and equitable access to solar. And then finally, for buildings, we need to build efficient, electric, new commercial and multifamily buildings, put existing buildings on an energy diet through energy efficiency improvements, and build net zero or net zero ready schools. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Ferretto. She is the Sustainability Director and Principal at Horde Copland Mott in Baltimore and a Commissioner on the Baltimore Commission on Sustainability, and Ben Roush, who's a Principal at FSI Engineers. Okay, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today. Next slide, please. What's most exciting for me about comprehensive climate legislation is that it's the ability to connect the dots that we've been talking about all night, from the planet through all of our communities in Maryland to every 519 of us on this call and all the residents of the state. Next slide. We know about these climate extremes happening all over the globe. Next slide. We know that this means that our temperatures are rising. The last 10 years have been the hottest decade. This is really important for the state of Maryland, who has like 3,000 miles of coastline. Our cities like Baltimore and Annapolis have been flooding. And we know that this world energy consumption is just projected to grow through 2050. Next slide. When we look at energy consumption, we're talking about emissions, and buildings are about 1/3 of this energy pie. This is the operating energy. This is about global carbon dioxide emissions. Next slide. And what architects are doing, the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, they have said that climate change is a health, safety, and welfare crisis, that it is our responsibility to protect our people, communities, and our planet. Next slide. We have something called the 2030 Challenge Commitment, where, like lots of other states, we're on a reduction, an energy reduction target. So the green color is that fossil fuel consumption reduction. The opposite of that is the blue, that's the fossil fuel going down to zero. And then we're supplementing that with renewable energy. Next slide. We know every 3 years we have new energy codes come out that get a little bit better, but they do not get us far enough. We need to step it up with bold climate legislation. Next slide. And we need to talk about things that, again, we've heard from Chairman Farvay and Senator Pinsky. We need a target goal to carbon neutrality. We need strong energy efficiency and conservation standards for new buildings, new constructions, renovations, and existing buildings. We need to talk about renewable energy. And one of the things that I think is most important is benchmarking for that accountability for our state. Next slide.
All right.
Now off to Ben.
Yeah. So I'm an engineer, and like an engineer, I want to address the things you're going to hear that might be, let's call them charitably misconceptions, and tell you that electric buildings emit less carbon than natural gas with heat pumps. The electric grid can and will handle all vehicles that we're talking about, and all electric buildings typically cost less, and net zero can be done for the same budget as any other building, with a caveat. Let's go next slide. We're doing natural gas first and electric buildings. Next slide again. So we have to put this in a greater context. Maryland is in two grids, the RFC East and RFC West. Next slide. Specific to RFC East, that's what I'm basing this analysis on, but you could do it the same way. From 2020, this is from the EPA Power Profiler, 716 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. Next slide. So this is this year's. It's actually slightly better, and it should be. Next slide again. We're on track to go to 40% better by 2030 than I believe a 2013 baseline. I'd have to go look that up. Somebody asked that question. And of course, the legislation that we have would take it to a 60% reduction by 2030. We're actually ahead of the target right now already, so that's not a giant deal. And net zero carbon by 2045 in our electric grid. Like any engineer, I made a graph of it. The line at the bottom, the blue line, is heat pump based buildings. It is the best for carbon output in pounds per CO2 per megawatt hour is over on that left axis. Gas buildings are the boiler based buildings with those upsloping lines on the top. So they are almost the worst. It's true that in 2020, 2021, the electric grid is slightly dirtier if we used electric resistance heating, think tea kettle. Not what we're allowed to do in actual buildings. We have to use heat pumps. Heat pumps are a huge carbon win. Next slide. Next, the electric grid. So I love this one, like we could never change the electric grid again. Let's go. The Maryland Commission on Climate Change did a building energy transition plan. You can download this from their website. They did a whole layout of how this is going to work for fuel switching, for getting existing buildings to get on board, to incentivize significantly incentivize movement to heat pumps. Keep going. And PEPCO did a study. I wish we had this study for BGE, but PEPCO did a study that did all electrification, including transportation. How much would our grid need to grow? The answer was 1.4 to 1.7% per year. They also did a historical retrospective where it's grown by much bigger percentages than that. So that's a thing. Next one, got to deal with cost. So let's hit the next slide. We know, Lisa and I have worked on a good many projects where removing the gas line was actually a net cost savings, even when electrifying that tiny incremental cost to go to heat pumps. The whole building project saved money. We've also worked on net zero schools. There's 3 net zero schools here, and their cost numbers. The numbers on the top are from the Interagency Commission on School Construction. You can see that the 3 net zero schools in Maryland were built for less than the average cost in the years they were built. So that's a load of phooey. You make design choices based on the budget you've got. I also put the numbers in parentheses there, what it would cost without solar panels. It is worth saying that these schools all receive significant grant money for solar panels, and we do need to address that in legislation to fund that if we truly want net zero schools. Lisa?
Thanks, Ben. It's easy to connect the dots from schools and engage in students to hopefully be active global citizens like us on this call. And we know, right, we all talk about that triple bottom line, the 3 E's, the 3 P's, and that when we reduce one of these negative effects, like reducing energy, we can reduce the negative effects in all of these categories, reducing carbon, greenhouse gases, pollution, health risk, COVID risk factors, operating costs, energy burdens. Next slide. We know that the energy burden of low-income households is 3 times higher than those in non-low-income households. It's even a little bit higher in cities like Baltimore. And weatherization is estimated to reduce this by 25%. Next slide. We've heard from Stacy about this as well. What are those benefits of better air quality to all of our residents? Can we increase life expectancy and just improve health indoor and outdoor? Next slide. The CDC says that this physical social environment is this main determinant of our health. Next slide. And so this bold, comprehensive climate legislation has this ability to enhance the health and well-being of our planet, our communities, and our people. Next slide. And of course, the time is now.
So I'm going to close us out and just say
Lori, mute yourself.
Sorry, I'm going to close us out. Thank you. I put in the chat ways in which.
Muted again.
Oops. Sorry. I just want to leave you with 3 words: efficient, electric, equitable, and get ready for some bold action this session. So now I want to turn it over to Emily Scarr, who's going to talk about PFAS.
Thanks, Lori. My name is Emily Scarr. I'm the director of Maryland PIRG, the state public interest group. First, I want to shout out some more legislators who joined us. So Delegate Sheila Ruth, if you're available to turn on your camera, please give us a wave. Also, Senator Sarah Elfreth and Delegate Sandy Bartlett, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm gonna talk about PFAS, and I want to start by showing a quick video for those folks who aren't familiar. It's about 4 minutes, and then we're going to talk for a couple more minutes right after about the bill we're supporting before rounding us out for the night.
As forever chemicals, they do not easily break down. Instead, they accumulate in the environment and in the human body.
Well, I guess my question to you is, when you take your children or your grandchildren trick-or-treating, do you let them have mystery candy? Why in the world are we allowing ourselves to drink mystery chemicals?
PFAS or PFAS are polyfluoroalkyl substances or perfluoroalkyl substances. They're also known as forever chemicals because they are pretty persistent in the environment.
You know, there's an old saying that says nothing lasts forever. Unfortunately, nothing, that is, except for fluorinated chemicals.
These chemicals have been used in a lot of different products, from microwave popcorn bags to Teflon pans to firefighting foam. And they're effective at those uses because they are water resistant, they resist oil, and they're also pretty heat proof. PFAS chemicals were first discovered in 1938, accidentally actually, by DuPont scientists. They were used a few years later in the Manhattan Project in some of the uranium research, and once that was declassified, they became more prevalent in consumer goods.
Some of these chemicals are associated with a number of negative health effects. It's estimated that 97% of Americans have detectable concentrations of PFAS in their blood.
It's hard to say exactly what health effects each of them will have. There's a lot of research going on with that now, and some of what we can tell is that some of these chemicals affect infant birth weight, they affect cholesterol, they affect the developmental and immune systems, and there may be others as well.
In Melvindale, in my district, PFAS just oozed out of the ground into the roadway, and residents are still searching for answers about where it came from.
PFAS chemicals are getting into our waterways in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's through groundwater near military bases, if the military base had used firefighting foam that contains PFAS. In other cases, the town might be near a landfill that has PFAS leaking into the groundwater as well. There are a lot of water treatment plants around the country that are looking to figure out how to take the PFAS out of their water supply. There is a way to do it that's fairly easy but a little bit expensive, and you can install carbon filtration. There are other ways that some other water utilities are experimenting with to remove different types of PFAS from their water.
Communities across the nation have asked us to provide a comprehensive approach to understanding PFAS and protecting drinking water.
The EPA has set advisory levels for PFOA and PFAS. Those are two different kinds of PFAS chemicals in drinking water, but that guidance is not necessarily enforceable. So there are some lawmakers on Capitol Hill that are interested in trying to push the EPA toward a more enforceable guideline or regulation for PFAS in drinking water. And there's a lot of attention to that, especially from the towns that are most affected by this.
New Jersey and other states have repeatedly urged the EPA to move forward with setting nationwide regulatory limits for PFAS under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, but the EPA has been very slow to act. New Jersey therefore had no choice but to move ahead to set its own guidelines.
Some states like Massachusetts and New Jersey have decided that they're not going to wait on the EPA to try to give them guidance on how to regulate drinking water. So they're moving forward with their own limits in some cases, or just guidance. And a lot of other states are sort of looking to them as leaders in this area. A lot of communities are calling for stronger federal action on PFAS chemicals, and it's going to be hard for the EPA and other agencies to ignore that. You can expect to see a lot closer attention to these chemicals from not only the EPA, but also maybe the FDA and others on this in the next couple of years.
To date, however, the EPA has yet to act, but it's time for much more than just that. It's time for us in Congress to take long overdue action. It's time for us to push for stronger standards, invest in cleanup, and improve protections for those who have suffered from the effects of contamination.
All right. So hopefully that is helpful background on the problem of PFAS contamination and the health risks. But to put a little bit of a finer point on it, Maryland is no exception. And the more we look, the more PFAS contamination we find. The Maryland Department of Environment has found PFAS in 75% of the drinking water it has tested. And we also know of contamination in and around more than a dozen military sites in the state. And just this fall, the Department of Environment also issued their first fish consumption advisory because of high levels of PFAS in some fish at the Piscataway Creek. And, allowing the widespread use of toxic chemicals that last forever virtually guarantees that our sources of drinking water and our food will become contaminated, and our families will be exposed to the chemicals that are linked to these terrible health problems. So to stop the chemicals from contaminating our drinking water and our bodies, we need to eliminate the sources of contamination, which means eliminating PFAS from our products and making sure they are disposed of properly. 10 states have already taken strong action to restrict these chemicals, but Maryland has yet to act. So I'm going to kick it over to Tom Hucker to talk about the bill we're supporting this year.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Emily. My name's Tom Hucker. I'm a senior advocate at the Natural Resource Defense Council, NRDC. We can stop most of the contamination that Emily described by passing Senate Bill 273 and House Bill 275, the George Walter Taylor Act, which is sponsored by Senator Elfreth and Delegate Love. That bill will stop the use of PFAS in 3 areas: food packaging, rugs and carpets, and in firefighting foam, and it will ban the mass disposal of these chemicals by incineration and landfilling. Restricting the use of PFAS today is a critical step in minimizing public health damage and ensuring future generations have a chance for a healthier world. We will be working to address PFAS pollution for years to come, but the first step in addressing our PFAS crisis in Maryland is to stop new contamination this year. By adopting some of the best PFAS practices from across the country, we can reduce some of the most harmful forms of PFAS contamination. And we can also build more awareness among state legislators, the public, and our candidates for state office. Ultimately, we need to stop using PFAS completely, to establish health-based limits for PFAS in water, and to hold the chemical industry accountable for the public health damage that they've caused. But first, we have to pass the George Walter Taylor Act this year. Thank you.
I think Ellie is going to close us back out, right, Ellie?
I will. Was waiting for my camera to turn on. Well, just wow, I really am in awe of all of our speakers tonight. This was phenomenal, and I hope everybody who's joined us, all 419 plus of you, are feeling as energized and motivated as I do right now, and that you're leaving us tonight knowing that environmental rights are civil rights, that we must be bold when taking on climate change, and that we must take action now on PFAS chemicals. As Chairman Pinsky said, we cannot be complacent, and we must act with boldness and a sense of urgency. But none of that can happen without you, without our advocates, without citizens getting involved. So please take a chance, if you haven't already, to look through the chat, find out ways to get involved. I know that there will be a recording of tonight's program, so you'll be able to share that and learn more. To all of the legislators who joined us, all 27 of you, thank you so much for joining us. And once again, really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to spend with us and learn about these essential issues. And I'm really looking forward to the day that we can do this again in person. So with that, unless anybody else from the planning committee has anything to add, I will say good night, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you on these issues. Take care.